I'm concerned about population immunity broadly across the world, and I think it's coming up and being reflected in unusual ways. The recent cases of meningitis in the UK stand out to me as something that doesn't sit right. It's not that people can't get meningitis, because they certainly do. It's just the way that it has been presenting. We had one in Canterbury that was a significant outbreak with two young people died, very sad. And then another one just over about 10 days ago where another young person died. And there's a combination of factors that I think is quite relevant. And the first thing is that I just did a presentation with regards to Kyle Busch. He is the NASCAR driver who died. And somewhere along the line, it's feeling as though everything is fitting together, that this is something that could be relevant. And if you want, you can see the relevant link for that presentation. It's in the description. And it is looking at when sepsis stops looking like sepsis. And critically, you will get access to this data dashboard by the link here that I'm going to be showing you. And so this is part of the challenge that we have been having. And so what I was then doing was looking at what was happening with pneumonia and sepsis. And this is where I started the journey from. And this dashboard is what I was saying you have access to when you go to the presentation. And it was looking at the fact that sepsis numbers are down 23%. That's where people are presenting with characteristics of sepsis. And yet we're seeing patterns where other things associated with sepsis, like low blood pressure, heart problems, kidney injury, respiratory failure, are all up, including pneumonia admissions. So something is not right. And I am going to try and explain to you what I think is going on and how this links together with regards to what is with meningitis. So let's first start with something that I think is important about the post pandemic period. The first thing you have to look at is just what the COVID immune team looks like. And I describe this as the monocytes, specific kind of immune cells, very important. They're like the tanks, neutrophils, they die quickly. They're like the infantry. And then you have the sophisticated, adapted precision defenders like the T cells, that's your Air Force, B cells, artillery that go on to produce antibodies, natural killer cells like your Navy, and then the mast cells as well. So the critical thing is that this is what you need to fight multiple bacterial and viral infections. And there's a very unusual thing that happens post COVID that a lot of people don't quite realize. And this is similar to what could have happened with measles, where you get immune amnesia. This is what also happens after COVID infection. And I think it's being underestimated. The COVID immune system gets depleted. After you've had the infection, your innate system still stands, your monocytes, your neutrophils and mast cells. These are the front lines first responders, but your adaptive immunity then becomes weaker. Now, the lymphopenia that occurs with COVID, where these lymphocytes get wiped out, is really unusual. And the worse it is, the more severe you have disease. This is, in my view, a really critical part of what we see happening, because with this taken down, there is less detection of danger, poorer control of new infections, and in effect, the immune response becomes imbalanced, and sepsis may present later and be more severe. And this is the bit that I think is going on. And we need people to start asking the hard questions. And when we look at, certainly, finally, the MPs are coming forward. This MP who survived meningitis is pressing the Prime Minister in the UK on why are we having these outbreaks. She had survived meningitis as a teenager, so it's certainly something that does happen. And she was reflecting on this young man, sadly, Lewis Waters, who just recently died after he contracted the infection. It's not that people don't die with meningitis, but as we said, this was the fourth case involving a student in the region of Reading, combined and added on to the cases that they had recently in March in Canterbury. Something is wrong. So when I thought about all of this in terms of the sepsis and so on, then I was thinking, okay, what is going on in terms of meningitis? So much so that I actually I tried to put together a dashboard that would help to be able to clarify what was happening with meningitis. And when I looked at meningitis, the numbers were down. Really strange. Why would the numbers be down? And yet, we are having more severe cases of meningitis. I want to try and show you what the dashboard looks like, so that you are aware of where we are with regards to this. So I put together this dashboard. What you have to realize, I'm able to do these things because I have been analyzing data for, let me just see now, maybe 9 months, looking at hospital admission patterns in the UK. We're talking about 186 million data points. So when I start looking and digging to understand the patterns, now it doesn't necessarily mean the population pattern is the same, and there could be ICD code changes, but a pretty good chance that I am close to what is going on. And so when we look at it, and I'm going to show you what I worked out just in the past hour with regard to meningitis, are they really rising in the UK after the pandemic? Now, what is remarkable? Look at this. Meningococcal cases are down 46%. Yet, sinus infections are up 21%, brain abscess up 15%. And this is the one we use to check and see if this is correct. Like back pain is stable, going down 17%. Something is wrong here with meningococcal cases down 46%, yet we are seeing young people dying. What in the world is going on? Okay, now this is my hypothesis, so you have to work with me on this. You don't have to agree with it, but here is my analysis of what is going on. Okay, so here we go through what happens with severe meningitis or meningitis septicemia. This is what usually kills someone, and I'll cover quickly the point about sepsis in just a minute. When we look at meningitis, a lot of people, about 1 in 10 people, will carry it in their nose and throat. And what's quite remarkable is that they don't really get sick, but they can pass it on. So they will then pass this on to someone else who isn't a carrier, and that person then could get sick. But when you look at it, especially in young people, most of them stay well. What happens is that a small percentage can then go on to have very severe disease. These are the ones that get the sepsis, meningitis, end up on intensive care, and these are the ones that could die. The characteristics that I'm looking at that are potentially relevant are their immune system, some genetics, the recent illness, especially COVID, then they're exposed, and if their overall health is poor at that time, maybe they're stressed, they're not sleeping, they can end up with severe disease. When I checked to see if this is higher, more people are carrying it, it doesn't seem so. So my suspicion is that more people are vulnerable and they are not presenting in the same way. And this is the same thing that happened with Kyle Busch and his sepsis. Normally, a good, strong immune system will give you indicators before you end up septic. The reason that this may happen, that something changes, is down to a characteristic that I've just been looking at in terms of severe disease. Now, this is again my extrapolation, but it seems to make sense. I'm going to show you right here in just a second this really important paper that has been done in 2024. Now, watch how this connects with what else is going on. This is lymphopenia. This was done in China in sepsis. Now, remember, I showed you in COVID, the lymphocytes get specifically taken out. When they looked at the narrative review of this, essentially what they found is that you get worse outcomes with sepsis if the lymphocytes are taken out. If you have low lymphocytes, you tend to have more severe sepsis, and this could then lead to what we're seeing, more severe disease. And I created a slide just to try and see if I could get that point across as to how this works. One of the things that people don't understand is how severe COVID had worked with regards to macrophage activation and how this is connected with regards to sepsis. So again, let's follow along. What I'm saying is that there has been a change in the way how the immune system is responding because COVID is still circulating. Young people are getting COVID, and I'm predicting that in a vulnerable cohort, say for instance, they're not a carrier of meningitis or meningococcus, they would then be at higher risk for more severe disease if they then became exposed. That's my hypothesis. And look at what I say is therefore happening. When you have reduced regulatory cells, these are some of the lymphocytes, these guys normally keep the macrophages, the tanks, in check. So they're like kind of like the peacemakers, and they kind of coordinate everything in the battlefield. They keep them in check. Now, let's assume the person had a recent COVID infection, say within a few weeks or something. They are depleted with their lymphocytes. Suddenly, this macrophage doesn't have the brakes on. It can then become hyperactivated, releasing multiple inflammatory markers. And this is what causes the hyperinflammatory sepsis pattern: low blood pressure, leaky blood vessels, clotting, blockage of microcirculation, poor oxygen delivery, failure of the organs. This is what would kill young people quickly if this happened without the brakes in place. This is a really important concept. And as I said, it's my hypothesis explaining what I think is going on in terms of the pattern. So let me just run through it so that you are aware of what I'm saying, just in case you came late. Here is what has been changing based on the statistics. Sepsis being recorded has fallen over 20%, but a lot of other things related to sepsis are rising. So my point is that it's not that sepsis is falling, it's that we're not recognizing it well. So the same argument that I'm making now is also relevant in the context of meningitis. So when we look at meningitis, and when we look at the meningitis cases, you then see a similar pattern where it's a 46% fall in meningitis cases. And this is therefore one of the critical factors that is affecting how we see disease presentation. So my prediction is, because COVID is still circulating, it's making people lymphopenic. Their lymphocyte counts are down. Their immune system gets dysfunctional. And so this is what it would tend to look like here. It becomes depleted, it's imbalanced, and it is at this period of time, if they then have exposure to another infection, that you can have overactivity of these monocyte macrophages, leading to severe sepsis. And that's essentially what I think is happening. And as I said, this is my analysis of the situation. You don't have to agree. But one thing you can't say is that something is not happening. Something is wrong. Something is not fitting together. And we definitely need to see if we can find answers to try and make sense. At the moment, as I said, when we look at the data, a 46% fall in meningococcal cases, yet more young people are dying. Something is not right. Now, vaccination is certainly one of the ways that they are managing this. But based on this trajectory, it looks as though they are going to have to broaden it to as many young people as they can. They don't normally do this in children over a certain age, but it's looking as though there is a problem that needs to be addressed. What I don't want to see is where the scientific community does an intervention without trying to explain to the population why. Why would this be needed now and not needed 5 to 10 years ago? We're having less circulation of meningitis in the sense of disease in hospital. It suggests maybe there's a change in presentation. More young people are dying. This suggests maybe there's a change in the way how the immune system is responding, and you can't blame that on lockdowns. We need objective scientific analysis to make sense of what is happening at the moment. And this is sadly what is lacking. As a final reminder here, I want you to take a look at this presentation I did. Sepsis down, collapse rising. This was looking at Kyle Busch, a NASCAR driver who died, and reflecting on the impact of sepsis. And you can then see this data dashboard about sepsis as well, and you can take a look at that. All very important information, and you just have to keep yourself educated. Here is the point that you must not forget. We need more people to start asking hard questions. Don't accept silly answers. We need to know exactly what is going on. You may not agree with my hypothesis, but you need to find an answer for what is happening at the moment, because it's not good enough that we just leave it and don't address the patterns that we're seeing. Have a great evening. Look forward to sharing more information with you in the near future.